All right, good afternoon. Welcome to Partner Perspectives. I'm Scott McIntyre, along with John Bloom from Infinite Green. Today we've got a special guest, Guhan Raghu from 3D Partners. Um, Guhan is somebody we've worked with for maybe 6 years now. Guhan, 5
Yeah,
years.
it's been a while.
Um, the what Guhan, and I'll let Guhan introduce himself and talk a little bit about his services. Um, but we partner with Guhan quite a bit on the services arm to make sure that, as technology is being implemented, that customers have a good foundation and they have the arms and legs to successfully deploy technology and make the most out of technology. So that's where we kind of partner. So Guhan, why don't you give a little quick overview of your background and 3D G?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys, first of all, for having me on the podcast. This is excellent. It's always fun to chat through the put me on a couch for 30 minutes. I'll tell anyone my problems. But yeah, so my name is Guhan Raghu. I'm partner and COO for 3DG Partners. We're a technology consulting firm based out of the North Texas area, Dallas based. We focus on enterprise organizations, and our main goal is around execution. It's not just around finding out the solution, but ensuring execution. And that's kind of born from my background. The past 10 years, I've been in different C-level roles in different industry verticals: retail, healthcare, even higher education. And one of the things that was the same story but different venue was always, we have a plan, but we never execute on it. So my goal with 3DG Partners was to make sure that we founded a firm that was based solely on, how do you get this stuff done? And what's the kind of partner that I needed when I was in the seat, right? I partnered with you guys when I was in the seat of CIO and COO. And that's really where it makes the difference, is get stuff done. It's great to have a plan and a 3-ring binder that looks very fancy with infographics, but shelfware is worth the shelf that it's placed on. It's going to collect dust. So that's what the organization's all about. My business partner, Doug Cardozo, his background is completely on the manufacturer and VAR side, so he knows what levers to pull on the supplier side. And meanwhile, I've been in seat in various C-level roles, so I know what companies are looking for and how to communicate those types of things. So our go-to-market strategy has resonated really well with our clients.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not evolved too far from what you originally intended when you first started the company and did that. I think, with the dynamics of the business world and everything, how have you seen 3DG Partners kind of change a little bit, but stay true to your mission as you've gone through the last couple of years?
So it's really about evolving and evolving faster than the environment around you in order to stay with things. And then that's a great question, because we originally started out as people needed support and staffing. And hey, how do we help get some things done? And we had very good connections, good networks through you guys as well, and pulling in different people to get projects accomplished. And then I built out the executive advisory practice, where we'd have other CIOs and other CISOs, et cetera, help advise our clients. So that started to grow a little bit more. And then we got into the channel where ultimately, how do you bring in and how do you match these, do this IT matchmaking, if you will? You got these projects that you're helping create roadmaps on, you're helping put people in place to ensure that you execute. But now with these large organizations, you need the backing of some very large suppliers who have national or even global footprints. And that's where we got heavily engaged in the past 2.5, 3 years, bringing in large partners and ultimately bringing them in to execute globally on some of the client projects that we've been working on and client initiatives. And that's been going really, really well. We've actually found a really good spot for ourselves in scaling that business, because it seems to be where a lot of these companies are needing to make change, especially right now. I mean, to grow your bottom line, you can either innovate or you can reduce costs, right? It's two levers to growth. And there's a lot of opportunity right now. And those are very broad things to just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. It's a matter of, all right, how do we help them determine, based on your industry vertical, based on your profitability, what's the best place for you to focus first, and then bringing in the right kind of suppliers around that whole environment, around that whole plan.
Yeah, it's ensuring that legacy build that you're doing kind of on the front end and in your original kind of intention of really bringing great leaders to the table for your clients, you're just adding in the areas that really make sure that that lasts a lot longer. It almost future proofs the engagement, right? And I think, you've got to add the tech, you've got to, or at least reference kind of where you're going in the next, I'll say 1 to 2 years is probably a better purview than anything over 2 to 3 or whatever, just because of the dynamics of everything going on. But in reality, right, I think companies don't want to do as many things, but they would rather do big bang things, but in bite-sized, prioritized, staged in sequence ways. And I think all of that, the answer is typically in the room with our clients. It's just like you were saying, they need a little bit of help from the outside in and making sure that they're doing the right things at the right time to get the benefit out of the engagement.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of the things that our clients right now are being tasked with are very broad initiatives, and they almost sound like moonshots, right? Every CEO that we've spoken with, yeah, I need AI. They need it like they need salt on a steak, right? I need AI. I need AI. That's great. You need AI, but now you have this push of bringing on this big differentiator, this massive new paradigm of working AI, but you have these IT leaders stepping away from the sign up sheet saying, please don't sign me up for that because we have such a broad view. I don't know how to measure success. And then you have folks who are already using several pieces of AI like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and you name it, right? And they're doing things. We have legal firms where people are trying to summarize contracts through those types of things. So there's a top-down pressure and bottom-up pressure where IT is the peanut butter and the sandwich getting squished together, figuring out how to make it all happen.
Yeah, how do you advise your clients to kind of start that conversation if they, dug their heels in and kind of said, "Hey, I'm going to wait and see what my competitor does or a partner of ours does or whatever." How do you get people off the bench a little bit into that thinking or even into the action?
So you said it perfectly just now, actually, where you said bite-sized pieces, right? That's where you got to start. You got to iterate. Because these moonshots always sound like these large scale, all right, massive initiative. We're going to the cloud, like back in the day, if you think of that, we're a cloud first company. What the heck does that mean, right? Now that just means you're going to repatriate a colo or a data center later because you didn't rationalize things right. It's the same kind of thing now where you've got to have that enterprise goal in mind, and you've got to really iterate on what that goal is going to be in smaller pieces. When you start seeing ROI, that's when you scale on it, right? Now, these are all generalisms. So let me give you some specific examples that we've tackled, maybe one in healthcare. AI, super broad, but there's two pieces to it in healthcare that we can focus on. One, how do you take the administrative burden out of a lot of things in healthcare? As everyone knows, we've all been to the doctor, we've all been to healthcare organizations. How much data gets inputted, right? When you arrive at a doctor office, when you arrive at the hospital, whatever it might be, there's a billion things in there, right? How do you make administrators' lives easier? AI is a great example of a small test bed that you can put in to figure out all these repetitive tasks. Anything I can put in a cookbook, I should be able to make some sense out of it from an AI solutions perspective. How do I reduce? That's an operational efficiency that we can bring about in healthcare that we've worked on with a couple of our clients. But now there's a clinical piece too, right? Clinical AI is a very different thing. That's about patient outcomes. That's where you're talking about making a difference on your business outcomes as opposed to just operational efficiency and cost reduction. So now when you talk about clinical data, how do you make sense out of your clinical data so you can drive different outcomes so that ultimately you can share data with other organizations? And as everyone says, people pay more for answers than they do for just data. So if you can make sense out of that data, provide outcomes and analytics around it using AI to manage. AI is really good at pulling large amounts of data together, right? As you know, and how do you do it faster? How do you do it better? How do you do it with more sense at the end of it? Those are some of the examples in healthcare that we've done. So when you boil it down, figure out what industry you're truly in, what is the value chain of your organization, and then determine how AI is best applied in an iterative way to either operational efficiency or to innovation. In healthcare, it's going to be administrator help or it's going to be clinical outcome improvements.
Guhan, are you seeing more interest in leveraging platforms AI capabilities. So things like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Epic in the healthcare universe. Do you see more interest in companies wanting to enable those capabilities that exist, or using maybe something a little bit more agile, like third-party tools, if you will, like a Poly AI, a Yellow AI, Core.ai, those kinds of tools on the side?
They want both in our customer base. They want both, but what are they capable of doing? You have to advise people on what they can do first versus what they, what the world is available, the whole world's available to you, but you got to focus on what you can do first. So embedded AI within the platforms that they already leverage is always an easier play for them to get started, because you have this partner in your example, like Salesforce or Epic or one of those elements. You have them, and we see it a lot in contact center too, because there's so much embedded AI in CX, right? It's easier to implement those types of things, because the harder part in these organizations is talking about adoption. We're not talking about replacing people. We're talking about adding teammates. That's really the adoption play that you need to advise on. Contact center, what would it be like? Imagine if we had an extra 1,000 contact center employees that could look over everyone's shoulder and say, hey, this patient needs this, then this, and this, these particular piece of information. It'd be great to have that, but guess what? Hiring, quote unquote, an AI teammate to help advise you in real time while you're doing it, that right there makes you better, makes your disposition better. And when you incent call center agents based on the proper disposition, you get better outcomes for everybody, right? Rather than how many calls did you answer this hour? That doesn't matter, right? Those stats are for the line level manager. The stats you really need to look at are, what are the dispositions on the outcome of the call that you just got, right? We have a large collection agency we work with. It's great that you made 1,000 phone calls outbound in this past hour. How much did you collect? Or you made one call, but you made $1,000 in collections. There you go. Always incent the right way. So there's a lot of adoption and cultural elements around AI that you can leverage on these embedded AI elements in these existing platforms. When it comes to creating an overlay of like Poly AI or other elements like that, that is when you have an AI platform and you're starting to look at, where is my data going to be housed? Does my LLM need to be more private? Does it need to be, the use case really determines a lot more detail there. There's a lot more foundational prep that goes into those smaller, but more agile, to your point. They are much more agile, but those side overlay elements like that, a lot of companies aren't quite ready to do that if they haven't taken advantage of at least some of the capabilities of their embedded AI. So that's where we're working with a lot of these folks to say, start that as a lab. Don't do mass experimentation, kind of like, and I'll bring it back to an old example of, hey, we're a cloud first company, put everything in the cloud. Did that work? No, it didn't work, right? With AI, you can't just be an AI first, an AI early adopter for everything. You have to take these smaller bite-sized pieces, calibrate them constantly with your outcomes. Then you're going to really see that true ROI around them. So
it's interesting you say that. We're finding that sometimes the second or third use case, kind of in priority and weight order for kind of an AI launch into kind of that arena of, hey, this is our first real splash, is much more successful, because what you're doing, what our clients, and we tend to advise our clients on a little bit differently, is thinking about it long term. Like typically you've got like one big opportunity or whatever, and you want to go tackle that use case right away, but it doesn't necessarily, to your point, bring the right platform or the right existing system and development within that system as the right way to move forward after that, right? So it kind of, we see that it's much easier to get maybe a second or a third priority in the mix, allows everyone to get their sea legs about them, get the right data stream working from a reports ROI and kind of a calc perspective, and then go back and tackle the big ones, because you've got a little momentum, you've got trust in the organization, so that people are seeing something that works. It's a little more momentum, but so I think it's kind of almost counterintuitive sometimes about, back to your point about AI and what C-suites typically want, or CEOs typically want, or boards want, is we want it now. We don't know what we want, but we want it now, and we need something immediate about it. And I was going to ask you about that. Like, do you feel like most organizations look at AI as it's a project I have to check off the list, or is it a lifestyle that they need to build into their business?
I think it's a really good parallel that I've seen over the years and how it applies now to AI is data analytics and enterprise analytics projects. They start out with, hey, I want this massive dashboard that tells me why revenue is down in this region, right? Okay,
Right.
I want that. That being said, that project took years and years to achieve because that's a large scale outcome that's great, but it was something that requires adoption across the board. It requires a lot of data to be cleansed, a lot of data to be structured, and those types of things. Once your data is structured, you can start pulling great analytics. But at the end of the day, it just tells you that this revenue's data is down, and here might be a couple of causes.
Right.
When you go to the cloud, okay, we have workloads in the cloud that are allowing us to do this enterprise analytics project quicker, easier, Snowflake, things like that. I've spent millions on data stage, Informatica, Oracle, only to just go into the cloud and be able to turn it on like that with Snowflake. So it got me there faster, but it still didn't necessarily give me the what do I do now? What are you going to do about it? The so what
Yeah.
everyone's always looking for. AI has the capability to give you the so what. The challenge is you got to have that appropriate adoption across the board where you're not just doing this experimentation of throwing all that data in there and seeing what comes out of it. It's more of it's got to be that holistic approach of understanding where all this data is going to be, how is it going to be governed, because as soon as you put bad data into it, you're going to get things that are going to tell you to do the wrong outputs. So there's a big challenge around that where you have this monolithic solution called AI. It's looked upon as a project, and it's destined to fail if you don't have the right kind of people. Need to understand what their roles are in these projects, quote unquote. A project is to stand up a solution that now is a new process based way of it's a paradigm shift, right? It's a way of working that's now modified, and you got to set an organization up, set up the people to understand how that's going to impact them and how they can use it.
Yeah, I would add an element of standardization in that discussion as well, where it's like, okay, we're going to automate this process, but there's 79 exception processes on top of it,
Yeah.
right? That you can't automate, which is 90% of what's in there. So you end up having this discussion, typically if you're doing it honestly, like, should we just standardize these processes? And then once we standardize them, then we could potentially automate them, but we might have created 90% of the value with the standardization.
Exactly.
Right? Thinking through, like with any technology capability, AI doesn't fix a broken process.
Yeah.
You could automate a part of it, right? But someone's still going to have to manually review it. So, this element of assessing whether you should do standardization, whether it's data or process, before you do the next step, which is layer on an AI capability to make hay, I think is an important part of the overall project that gets missed oftentimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think retail has the tendency, and we've all had retail backgrounds on this particular call, but the one and dones. Hey, we can always cut staff in the stores if we need to make some, SG&A margins up or whatever, and that's kind of a one and done thing because you're losing a lot of that legacy knowledge of who's interacting and interfacing with the customer on a regular basis. But when you look at kind of the general sentiment of, and Guhan, you said this, like, how does the organization write themselves into that story, right? And think about even HR departments today trying to evolve their job descriptions in the IT organization or even outside in the business organization as it relates to AI. Everyone wants 5 to 7 years of experience or more, right, to do some of these tasks, but most of those resources that have been involved in AI for 5 to 7 years are taken. And you're not going to get a lot of that. And without recasting it, so I've seen a lot of that in looking at job descriptions and trying to help companies through organizational shift and dynamics of that, and thinking differently about it. And this one and done mentality of, well, we'll just cut, we'll create our benefit here, But then what happens is you look back on down the mountain, and it tends to be, wow, we lost a lot of knowledge and a lot of just pure interaction, kind of interfacing with the customer that isn't giving us a good direction forward. But anyway, I think just the change management and what we've all been talking about from an AI, we've talked a lot more on this particular cast about the people around AI than we have the AI itself. So it's interesting how it's more of an and strategy than an or strategy. It's not, Scott, to your point, it's not going to fix something that was a legacy process that was broken because I knew this when this happened, this and this and this. It's hard to code that. Not to say you can't, but it's more of this enhancement around how am I looking at the world through these glasses of I've got some assistance here in some cases, but I still have to be really on purpose and on top of our business to make the right moves to get involved. And I think that's where a lot of the hesitation is to jump into the pool. And I think that's, at least I feel like it's our role to help companies through a little bit of that. But there's still a lot of hesitation. Guhan, are you seeing a lot of hesitation in your side too?
There is hesitation because it's we were joking about this earlier that that old saying of the cloud is just someone else's computer, and that's just the wrong way of thinking about it. AI is just someone else's brain, and that's one of the challenges around being able to think a little bit broader on how you leverage something that's powerful. And I think people don't quite know what to do with it yet. That's where they need this shepherding to understand. One of the things around HR that you mentioned, right? What's the paradigm for HR, especially in high attrition organizations like retail, right? It's a revolving door of people, very high attrition, or contact centers, or you name a lot of high attrition, critical high attrition roles.
Right.
A lot of the paradigm around HR was, okay, let's open up a job posting. Let's get 12 million resumes. You might have a CEO that might apply for a clerk job, and you might have someone who's never been in any job applying for that same clerk job. But it's just this mass rush of resumes. AI is great in terms of filtering a lot of that stuff, but it does lose a lot of potentially really good candidates too. One of our clients is doing something interesting where they've used AI to look at, in my region where this job opening is going to open, this is before they even open the job, in my region, here's the type of demographic that I have, here are the people that I have, here's the type of experience that they have. And yeah, they might already be employed, but as you know, a lot of people will jump jobs when they're already in one as opposed to when they're on the bench looking for another job. So you have to have that thought and that mindset of, oh, I'm going to look for another job in order to submit an application. They kind of flip the script a little bit saying, these people are the ones we want. They're already in seat. I'm going to try and get them. I have to offer something great. But I have to identify them first based on the role that I have available. And they use AI to actually comb through that large amount of data of candidates. They don't even know that they're candidates yet, but they become candidates for this role. Sure. And they're proactively trying to solicit these folks. That actually worked out really well in terms of bringing in some high talent. So if you think about it, flipping the script is something that people still have to do. AI is not going to necessarily do that for you out of the gate, right? So that's the part where there's hesitation in terms of thought leadership around what can I do with a solution that's powerful. So again, that's where we got to help them understand, and giving people examples is the best way to get their memories, their creative juices really flow. So that's how we kind of angle appropriately, kind of make sure that they aren't a few degrees off where they need to go when they start this journey. That's how we help our clients parachute through into the right place.
Yeah, there seems like a lot of mistrust in the world right now around everything, or at least hesitation is more in the, there's how many different applications of quote unquote AI that pop up every week, every day, whatever. And, the more you wait, the less opportunity you have to make a stand and make a move. And I think it's, back to our retail days, it was how fast can you have the idea and then execute against the idea and see if it was scalable. And if it didn't, you cut it down and moved on to the next thing, right? And I think that's where, to your point about healthcare, I think that's where healthcare really takes advantage of some of those retail, resources that are out in the market, right? And say, hey, I'm used to testing and trying and failing and then finding the right way and succeeding. And I think more of that test and try mentality I would propose that the world needs more of that. We need to try with an umbrella of safety, or just tell your customers, "Hey, we're trying to figure out the right thing for you." They'll give companies credit for dust flying, right?
Mhm.
If you tell them you're doing that, you want their feedback. I mean, we're all over surveyed to the hilt right now, but I'd love to give feedback that's honest and appropriate to the service that I got or that I didn't get. And it's got to help if as long as they're doing something with it, right? So I just think, the customer is going to steer you in the right direction. You can either start now, and if you're waiting for somebody else to make a bigger move, you might lose your market, and do that. I just think there's much more opportunity in smaller bite-sized pieces to get off the bench and start these AI capabilities. And they might not turn into AI projects, but they might be more of, hey, this is just something that we should have done, Scott, to your point about re-engineering process or whatever, in the past. But I think just in general, people are waiting because they want somebody else to take the risk. And I'm generalizing completely, but
Well, and frankly, some of these projects that have failed that are highly visible, they don't want to fall prey to. So it's one of those things where the companies that kind of jumped out, did something unique that was very customer facing and visible, did not go through all the due diligence all the way through their
yeah,
knowledge, their process, and their data. And so these solutions are very surfacey, but not quite ready for prime time, and not really quite solving the business problem that they
yeah.
wanted to.
It
And
just it
go ahead.
just seems to bring more, Scott, of the leading by consensus, where, hey, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but everyone is hired to do a job, right, and to bring their best to the table. And in some cases, I just think if one person in that consensus build just says, well, I'm not sure, then that just creates doubt, maybe not even fact based, right? And so I just think from a leadership perspective, leaders need to be able to lead more with the ability to value the, call it the C suite or the senior leadership kind of peer group, to guide and steer, but to listen to the customer and go do more boldly. I mean, I was always told, hey, if you're going to go make a mistake, make it loud and proud, but be convicted about it, and that's okay. As long as you're learning from it, moving quickly, and not tanking the company in the process, right? And we all have those lenses that we have to make sure we're not doing that. But I'll tell you, there just seems to be, the right ideas are in the room typically, and being able to execute them seems to be a little bit harder, these days than it used to be.
I think that's a great point. The right ideas are in the room because these are the folks who see it, right? They see what's going on. They
Hmm.
know what's wrong. How do they vocalize it appropriately? Which,
Right.
which is it's easy to say that. That's a very challenging thing for someone to do
Sure.
because not only do you
Yeah.
have to identify the problem, you have to come up with here are potential ways to solve it. Here are the risks that we're going to.
Hmm.
And how do you set expectations across the board? Now, if you look at it, that's almost like a sales process. If you think about it,
Yeah.
we need better salespeople to vocalize. We need sales training rather for people to vocalize, which means business justify, set expectations. And that way, when you have a leader like a CEO or a board to say, we're going to go AI, we need AI. Okay, put your money where your mouth is.
Hmm.
Here's what we're going to do. It may or may not work because AI, we're going to try, we're going to fail, but we're going to fail fast, to your point.
Hmm.
And then we're going to find the right way to apply this to get a differentiator. If you
Yeah.
apply it across embedded AI and then ultimately come up with your own platform, now you're differentiating based on your company and you're not waiting. You're not a laggard behind other people who are doing it ahead of you.
Right.
But it's all about selling the idea appropriately to your leadership so that they can put their money with their expectations forward and fund these experimental opportunities that could potentially have huge reward as long as you
Yeah.
set that stage the right way. I think that's where we need to continue coaching these
Hmm.
technology leaders and business leaders, right? These don't
Yeah.
just originate from IT; they're from all over the place. So
Well, and that helps us learn too, right? I mean, I don't want to say that I have all the answers, because, man, there aren't, all the answers haven't been out there yet, right? But certainly, again, taking the appetite for speed, for change, for investment makes a company unique, and how the people write themselves into that story, ultimately becomes how well they'll execute against any kind of new system or process that gets brought into the system to make the company better, right? You talked about 3DG partners. You guys evolved from day one because you saw a need that wasn't being met after the initial trust was built. And that's no different for other companies. I mean, companies need to have their teams, rally around that cause and go push the envelope. And then typically it becomes bigger than the leader that started that. We're all, you step away from the body and it becomes much more, interactive and automated to some degree, no pun intended. And it kind of builds upon itself. And that's the kind of AI I think that we need, is letting people really expand their ability to leverage technology, but leverage their business knowledge and some of the things, Scott, that you were talking about up front, so that these solutions become bigger and broader than what they initially intended, without being, so highly risked within their organization that nobody wants to do anything and step up. So
Yeah.
I just think there's so much more value in the people in that process than just defining a technology and letting the technology kind of fit into the square hole if it's, the round peg.
Yeah, having the right foundation in place, having a little bit of people alignment. Doesn't have to be organizational alignment across the board, right? Just a little bit, and matching it with a capability that can create value in the organization. I know we're up against 30 minutes went fast once again.
Always.
We love to have these conversations. That's why we partner with a company like Guhan's company. If you want to have conversations with us about technology, how we got started, some use cases, whether it's healthcare, retail, manufacturing, we've got plenty of stories to tell. There's a meeting QR code if you want to meet with us, or please feel free to reach out to Guhan via LinkedIn or other. And we're always happy to have the conversation. So thank you for joining us today. Any last words?
In this stage, John, you mentioned you don't have all the answers. And none of us do. But building consensus is easier when you all have the same questions, as opposed to and that's a great lead in to helping build that AI adoption piece. And again, thank you guys so much for having me on. This has been great, and time has just flown by. I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for your partnership, Guhan. And, we love the guys at 3DG and the team members there, and our team does too. So I think, these are examples of how it can work. And again, I think it's easy for us to have a 30-minute, an hour conversation, no strings attached, to just share a little bit about those easy successes. And I think that's what I would encourage the listening audience to and the viewing audience to do, is to press the envelope on where it is that you're being stuck right now. And if you need someone to come in and help you get unstuck, like I said, I think the answer is in the room, and we'd be happy to do that. I know Guhan at 3DG Partners, they do that really well as well, and we've done it well together. So there's answers out there, and there's opportunities out there. We just want you to jump through so that we can move on and see what the next AI that hits the market does, and get to that next point versus sitting here and not doing anything. So thanks, everybody. We appreciate you listening and viewing. And like Scott said, let us know if we can be of assistance in the future. Guhan, thanks so much for joining us. And